All right. Hey, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, and this is the weekly meeting of Kubernetes SIG Docs. And I have to confess, I haven't even looked at our agenda for this week, so let me find that really quick. All right. It's a fourth Tuesday in January, and that means that this is an APAC meeting time. So we're meeting at 6 p.m. Pacific, back to 10:30 a.m. The other 3 Tuesdays of the month. New contributors. I see no one. Let's move on to updates and reminders. This week's PR Wrangler is Steve Perry, and next week's Wrangler is Caitlin Bernard. So really quickly on PR Wranglers. Tunda Oladipupo was up last week to be a PR Wrangler, and I didn't see any activity from him. I didn't, when I pinged him with a weekly reminder in Slack, I didn't get a response or anything. So just has anyone heard anything from him? No? Okay. So in that case, we will need to open a couple of PRs and remove his approver status, hopefully just temporarily. But the SIG Contribex and the steering committee has asked that we be really proactive about keeping our approver permissions nice and tight. We generally do a really good job of that, so I would like for us to keep doing a good job of that. So I don't know, it's either Jim or myself will have to approve it. It's probably easier if someone else opens it. Either like Jim and I are going to have to do the handoff one way or another. Someone else can open that PR, but I don't know. What do you think, Jim? Can we delegate that and just approve it, or should you or I open that and then like tag each other for the approval?
I don't want to voluntold anybody, but maybe Brad would be a great person to open the PR, and then we can LGTM and approve it.
So the person who opens the PR is going to get all the grief here. So
I don't necessarily think that there'll be grief just because it's a decision based on Contribex, and it's not necessarily a permanent decision or anything. I'm happy to open it or run it, but I think it's more of a delegation of responsibilities. And the reason I was saying Brad is considering your role as, shadowing in to be in that chair.
Okay.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah. And it's a good way for me to learn. I want to make sure I do it right. So I'll work with you, Jim, just make sure I do it right. Is it okay?
Yeah.
My one comment would be that we feel like we have enough process. So what if it turns out, hypothetically, he was on a cruise for a week or something and didn't know, and he's like, yeah.
We welcome him back.
What's that?
We welcome him back.
Welcome him back. Okay, so it's kind of I like the way you're phrasing it. It's an easily revertible step, but it's a very proactive step to get attention. It's most certainly gonna get attention when we do something like that. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Cool.
I hope he is on a cruise. I hope he's having a good time.
But I do like the because any one of us could miss a week and something could happen, but I guess you're more concerned about the lack of response to your what happened. I just make sure we got a little bit of process.
Yeah, and to be totally honest and clear with everybody, I've missed a week doing the PR Wrangler shift, and it's a mistake that has been made before. And I think that type of response is a new type of response to be a little bit more proactive in cleaning up that approvers and owners file. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's necessarily out of line, especially with the attitude of, hey, we're glad to have you back, but we want to be active on who's approving and who's not approving. And if you're not actively doing what you said you'd be doing, let's make sure we clean that up.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool.
It's I do last fall when one of our approvers in China had missed his PR Wrangler shift and hadn't responded for a while. I did the same thing. I opened a PR to disable his approver status and said, hey, let me know that you're okay. When you're ready to come back, let me know. You're welcome back at any time. And I think maybe like 3 weeks later, he responded and said, hey, sorry, I've been absent for work. I'm going to be absent for work for a while, but I'll let you know when I can come back. So yeah, that's, yeah, in no way is this punitive. We just need to make sure that, that we know who can approve, and we don't just like leave permissions, sort of stranded behind like stale breadcrumbs with the potential to do destructive actions in a repo.
Okay, sure. And I'm happy to take that action item. And
Cool.
I'll just work a little bit with Jim, make sure I get it right, and not the one that caused havoc in the repo.
Thank you, Brad.
My pleasure.
All right, let's talk about docs. 1.18 docs update. I do not see Vineeth. It's like 6 a.m. his time. I'm not surprised. I don't know. It's like I have not checked in with him at all in this release cycle yet. I know it's a little early in the cycle for docs, but I did see the discussion around merging versus rebasing that happened a couple weeks ago. So Jim, do you know, did you hear any follow-up after all of that?
The last that I heard from Beneath was there was going to be the forceful rebase of the release branch to overwrite the Chinese localization changes, so there'd be no longer any conflicts. I haven't followed up to see if that's still the case or not afterwards, but I was helping Beneath with that out and letting him know that it's okay to make that change, and that's the agreed upon direction. Furthermore, I have on my plate for the 118 release cycle, and I can put in the notes here as well, is that I'm working on the KREL. There is the release engineering tooling, and we had the meeting around using that tool as opposed to doing it manually. So it's still very much so a work in progress and pulling the bits and pieces together to start working on that. But I'd imagine that picking up steam here shortly. I have a CKA exam to take on Friday, and that's kind of taking some of my efforts.
Woo!
I'm looking forward to that. And once that's out of the way, I feel like the KREL tooling for release engineering will be one of my top priorities to get through. So while it is for the 118 cycle, I don't think it will benefit Vineeth as much as it will benefit whoever is the 119 release lead.
I'm just taking really quick notes. Okay, so I'm looking at the branch for release-1.17, and I don't see a force push. I still see that the commits that were problematic are still on top of it and ahead of master. So we need to follow up with Vineeth and make sure that that happens sooner rather than later.
I'll take the extra time to follow up with him on that.
Cool, thank you, Jim. Security docs update. I see no Seth. Seth, hearing our thoughts. Let's see. Okay, so time update for the meeting, for the weekly meeting. Caitlin, I know, had floated the idea of a new meeting time for Tuesdays because 10:30 a.m. doesn't work especially well for her. So I chatted a little bit with Jared this week, and I don't see a lot of interest or activity in this doodle. And to me, that says that there's not a lot of impetus or strong opinion about what time we hold this meeting. So I will take an action item to follow up with Caitlin and say that if she wants to propose a specific new time, that's going to be easier than trying to get consensus out of a bunch of people who don't really care about what time it is. Let's see. Tech will talk with Caitlin about proposing a specific a time. There is no R in specific.
Will we have an opportunity to say, "Oh, we have a conflict at that time"? I feel bad
Absolutely.
that I didn't fill out the doodle. That slipped through my cracks, and
No, the time proposal will happen by fiat, but the decision will not.
okay.
Okay, PR template change. Oh, this is interesting. I know nothing about this. I have no memory of this place. To quote Gandalf. Oh, this is nice. So Tim, do you want to talk about this this proposed revision to the pull request template?
Yeah, sure. So I'm mentioning it in this meeting because it's kind of an admin thing. It's kind of quite wide-reaching. Actually, I think I probably need to rebase. Actually, I now need to click on it and check. I missed the last meeting. But I kind of want to get like opinions on it as much as I want to get like, you know, the actual review is probably not the important thing here. It's like, what do people think about doing this? Am I saying the right thing? Well, Zach, you're muted, by the way.
Zach, were you saying something?
Difficult to find that button. I see that there's a follow-on to 18800 for the Chinese template specifically. Yeah, I like this. So yes, this I like. I like the idea of this. Do we update this every release? So I'm not that concerned about having like hard numbers declared for versions.
If only there was a robot that could do this sort of thing.
It would be lovely. Okay. So are you, to make sure I understand, you're just looking for like feedback about the specific language?
I want to make it visible. If anyone, what I don't want to do is have it merge and then people go, "Oh, this isn't what I wanted." You know, this is a big surprise.
Gotcha.
So lazy consensus is fine for me.
I think it's a great proposal. Speaking me personally, and this is no reflection on anything here about this pull request template. It's a lot of words in the sense of, if I'm doing a pull request, I might be quick to just pass through it or delete it or make a change very quickly to just move on. But I would imagine if you're a first-time contributor, that opinion might change, or that preference might change. I don't know if there's a way to trim it down, the amount of hard-coded versions that are in there. While you do touch this every release, it's a very manual process. So you are tweaking each one of those versions, you're increasing or decreasing. If it's a robot, no problem. But since it's not, I don't know if there's a cleaner way to lay this information out. And with me not doing the work and a lack of a suggested alternative, I'm happy to see this merge.
Well, with that feedback, it's given me some ideas. And I think what I'll do, I can make a new page in the contribute section, link there, and then that will have the right numbers in it because it's a page.
And there's a robot that keeps that page nice and tidy.
Yeah. So I'll have a go at that. And that feedback's really useful. So thank you, people.
Did we always have to remember to add a description, or is that new, Tim?
Yeah, so the current, I mean, have a look at the diff, but the current template's kind of, let me just...
Because so many pull requests come in that don't have just a simple description that says, here's why I changed this.
Yeah. So the old one says, remember to delete this note.
Yeah, and so I really like that.
And they never do.
But adding the description, you know, so many times that would be just so helpful, and you're like, oh, that's why you made this change. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Cool.
So
Lazy Consensus says this is awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that the other thing I've copied from elsewhere is that it's a comment. So if you do leave it, you get a blank description, and shame on you.
Thanks. Okay. Reference links and localization. Oh, thank you for boosting the attention on this. Whoever added this. So I wanted to specifically to boost attention to this PR and the underlying issue. And this is really important for localization teams. We had some folks notice that when people went to kubernetes.io/security, they were directed to the Chinese version of that page. And there was no way to access the English content because every time that you visited, it would forcibly redirect away to the Chinese version. So after some digging, there's a complete description of the underlying issue in, was it 18895? No, 18896. But basically the way that Hugo handles aliases means that Hugo is completely agnostic. If multiple files have the same alias in it, and they both, if you lead an alias with a slash, that points to like a top level domain alias, and it will create a redirect to point to that. But Hugo does absolutely no validation of whether there are conflicting aliases, whether one or more localizations or pages have an alias to that particular slug. So Hugo basically just, it renders those aliases before it renders any content. So whichever alias it renders last ends up being the one that wins. So it would render English first, and then because Chinese also had a leading slash in front of the security alias, it rendered Chinese over the top of that. So basically, the TLDR from this is when you create aliases, remove the leading slash. So that way that when people go to see, for example, if people want to see a security warning in French, they can see that specific security warning. And they don't get, for example, forcibly redirected to English content. And the other way around, if people, yeah, just basically make sure to not to use a leading slash when you're creating an alias. Make sure that that localization, that an alias is specific to a localization.
And that alias is in the actual file itself, the markdown, the front matter, right? It's not the actual aliases file.
Yes, it is in the front matter of individual files. So it's I don't know if there's a, yeah, it's like looking at 18895. Let me share my screen really quick. That is not going to work. I'm not getting screen previews, and I have way too many screens open to try and navigate. But yeah, if you look at the pull request 18895, you can see, just compare the diff there, and you can see the difference. Many thanks to Christoph Lecker for fixing that and also bringing it to our attention. Okay. Related conversation around security links. Jim, you want to talk about 18834?
Yeah, sure. So this all came about just because it was a quick fix PR, one of those things you see out in the wild and you say, hey, this will take 2 seconds to fix. And I just ran off and created a PR. Conversation ensued around that PR, and I wanted to make sure that it was more of a community consensus or lazy consensus, more or less, around the direction of how we handle aliases. So to take a step back and talk a little bit about the context was in one of the TGIKs, or thank God it's Kubernetes or Friday, or I forget the actual way that breaks out, but it's the old Heptio, now VMware series. Duffy was working through an example on the API server. And I know that Duffy in the past has worked a lot with Ian Coldwater as well on security presentations. And at the end of those presentations, they have quick links to security documentations. So things like RBAC, things like general security context, vulnerabilities, CVEs. So what I saw was someone trying to use a link that maybe they were comfortable with using that no longer existed. In this case, it was k8s.io/RBAC. So I was like, hey, this would be a really quick alias to put in k8s.io/RBAC. We'll redirect back to the RBAC documentation. Makes a lot of sense. Tim and Karen both brought up some very excellent points about this potentially opening Pandora's box of, if we're creating aliases for documentation and they're not really where the pages live, do we want to get into this mess of, this documentation really is this URL, but now we actually have this alias here. I'm not necessarily in love with the solution or the PR is really just a quick fix, but I realize this is something that should not be decided by one individual or one PR. And that we should really have the conversation as a team about, do we want to add in those short links? And furthermore, from the redirects issue that you brought up a few bullet points earlier, maybe it's not even the right place to have that redirect. Instead of having it in the actual overall static redirect area, maybe it's better suited for the individual page itself, as opposed to where it's at today. So 2 questions are, do we want to make short links in the efforts of security and simplicity for slide decks and things of that nature? And is that where we want to draw the line? Or in the second part being, is that the right approach?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So, oh golly. To be honest, I don't know what the best practice around an underscore redirects file is. But if there is a best practice around that, like an informal internet standard for what a underscore redirects file does, then I would suggest that we adhere to that. But in the absence of a general consensus, I would say let's think about using the underscore redirects file only for content that no longer exists. Like if the originating URL is simply gone, then that would make it that particular URL would be a candidate for underscore redirects. But so Jim, I like the idea of specifying aliases in the front matter of individual files. The concern that comes to my mind is searchability, or like discoverability. How discoverable will those aliases be? But I mean, that's a problem that would exist on any site with like more than 20 pages. So I don't know that that is a concern that we need to like stop us from doing it. So I guess I like the idea of making it immediately clear in the content the URL where that content lives. So if people want to look at that file, they can see without having to open the underscore redirects file what it's redirecting to. Like the underscore redirects file isn't a self-disclosing file. If you know it's there, you can look at it, but there's nothing to tell you if you're looking at the content of a file, there's nothing to tell you that the sub redirects file is where a content gets assigned as a particular redirect. So I like the idea of having using an alias in the front matter of a file to disclose the redirect for that file. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome, and I would agree with that. That sounds good to me. And I guess that opens up to the secondary question: is this something we would want to get into? Do we want to take it on case by case basis? Like I said, I've got no skin in the game. I just wanted to fix a link that was broken.
So this is what happens when you have a site with like hundreds of pages, is that anytime you make a process improvement, untangling all of the, like what should be a straightforward improvement becomes a thorn bracket. So, like if we like make an issue about it, I mean, the work is actually fairly straightforward. It's tedious, but it is straightforward. There's not a lot of ambiguity in the task. So like we could, I mean, it would technically qualify as a good first issue. It wouldn't be a pleasant first issue, but it does meet the criteria for a good first issue. So I guess that's my way of saying that, yes, I think if we're going to adopt that, then let's adopt it now. And like in a year, when we look at this and go, what the hell were we thinking? It's clear that we implemented our own idea for a best practice.
That sounds good to me. I'm curious, Tim or Brad or David, any other comments on that?
I'm going to have to trust Charles' judgment on that.
No objection here.
There's no real clear answer. It's just kind of a judgment call.
Cool. So I'll open up an issue. This kind of aligns with the security docs approach as far as consolidating our security information. These links might change, they might move. It sounds like keeping them on the front matter there at least keeps them in the same documentation. Open up the issue, open up the, or link the PR then to said issue with the minor change. And that way, I think this becomes more of a, I hate to say, hey, Seth, this is your problem now, but it becomes more of an initiative for the security sub-project. And as that starts getting cleaned up, I see this being a very minor issue. But like I said, I wanted to make sure that this is team consensus and not Jim saying, here's a great idea for, 1 minute fix. And then why the heck are we doing this? So I appreciate the comments.
I am so pleased that you have learned from my mistakes. But yeah, no, that's, thank you for seeking consensus on that, because I mean, you're right. That is it would be very easy. That's like a deceptively deep issue underlying that change. So yeah, nice. Well thought out.
I got to give credit to Karen on that one for raising the flag.
Karen's so awesome. I feel like I wish Karen would come to meetings. Whatever's keeping her from doing it, but I would just love to like say all the nice things about Karen in a place where she could hear it. So Karen, you're amazing. Heart. Okay, Korean localization update. Junyi is not able to make it tonight. I'm very sad, but go live your best life. But he did leave us an update. They have a new reviewer, which is cool, and they've finished localizing 1.16. So yay, Korean localization team. And let's see, they are 2 milestones deep into localizing 1.17, which is amazing. And they have a local offline meetup for docs localization on February 13th, presumably in Seoul. So awesome job. Good work, Korean team. All right. Let's talk about process. Jim, you have officially moved the meeting notes. Thank you for prompting me to LGTM that and not approve it twice.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for approving that. This is a real quick housekeeping I want to make sure is in the meeting minutes. Essentially, it's touching base on what I talked about around 2 weeks ago. We had Google Docs everywhere. We're consolidating down to a repo. The link is now posted in the meeting minutes. And my action item from here on out is deleting all of the archived emails or all the archived Google Docs, pointing them to this repo, and then updating the current doc to point for the previous meeting minutes to be in that repo. A little bit further than just having that repo merge with our old meeting minutes, there's also a README inside of that repository. So once 2020 becomes 2021, whoever wants to create that next archive of documentation will have an ability or process to do so. So nothing major, just getting on the books.
Thank you. I appreciate the housekeeping. It is unglamorous, but very helpful. Okay. David, let's talk about diagrams and the fact that I have put this diagram funding first on my to-do list. I'm sorry, I let it go today.
No worries.
The Chinese security redirect fire ate my day. So yes, I will have, actually, let's look at it right now. Okay, feedback.
Larry and Tim weighed in, and I cleaned up the document accordingly. They had great feedback. And then one thing you added was if there was a way to have like a dollar amount and a vendor and just a straightforward explanation. So I added the sentence as best I could, but without actually going and getting a bid or a quote. I don't know how to put a vendor or dollar amount in the variable brackets, which, by the way, I like the style of that comment.
It makes it very easy for the people responsible for funding to, yeah, basically. So yes, that is exactly what I'm asking for. So to drive this, it means interfacing with a contractor. So that means like finding somebody who can do the work and getting a quote from them.
Is there a list of vendors that CNCF has, or I could start with?
I can ask internally, but my experience so far has been, so when I go to Chris Anisic, my boss, usually amounts to, hey Chris, I know somebody who can do this, and like when I usually have to do my own contractor research and like quote soliciting, things like that. So there is no like approved, we don't maintain an approved vendor list in house. We just like have a, occasionally like, oh yeah, we worked with them before. That's pretty good.
Okay.
So
if you've got those contacts, because I mean, with the talent pool in CNCF, there's got to be some great connections in terms of like 2 or 3 places to start with, word of mouth. If you've got a few, I could take the ball and run with it. If you throw a few my way, I don't mind doing that.
Okay. That's reasonable. I think specifically like Alessandra Amato probably knows a few folks. So yeah, I will. I'm actually going to do it while we sit here and type. Anyone and a graphic designer for creating icons and diagrams. Bonus points for having worked before. Right, message sent to CNCF Slack.
Cool, thank you.
Cheers. Casting vendor contacts. All right. Amusingly, Jim Angel, I'm looking at the action item. Google's giving me a suggested action item for opening an issue for when aliases are used. And it's asking me if I want to assign this action item to Jim Zemlin, CEO of the CNCF. I'm tempted to do it just for the troll value, but
I'm going to highly recommend that doesn't happen.
My own fears, like my own sense of self-preservation has kicked in and said, that's probably not a good idea.
Are we all familiar with the phrase CLM?
What is CLM? No, I'm not familiar with this.
That is a career limiting move.
Nice.
Yes.
I will have if I did that, I would attract the attention of important people. And
Wow, it's good.
that seems like a bad idea. All right, that is the end of our agenda. Anything else that folks would like to talk about? Well, all right. I'll call it in 5. That's a SIG meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a good
Have
one.
a good week.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye.